it's going up on the node Zoom or
Yes.
the node. Okay. We should also make sure we have access to the OpenJS Foundation one because that's.
Yeah, I don't. So
okay.
Anyway, we are live. Hi, folks.
So one of the things that I'll need, I can grant access to the OpenJS YouTube account as well. I just need a list of accounts of people who would like to have access.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Joe, do you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, sure. All right, great. So we're live. Thanks everyone for joining us on another OpenJS Foundation Cross Project Council weekly meeting. Yeah, so let's get things started. Looking at the agenda, the first item, and let me know if I'm forgetting to touch on anything before we dive right into the agenda. I don't think we had, I guess, yeah, okay. So the first thing on the agenda is the Tsc issue, let's see, 698 on the Tsc. This is an update to the Tsc Charter. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion as to whether the board and the CPC needed to approve this. I think it's just the CPC. Was that confirmed, Miles? Is that correct?
So the way in which the bylaws for the CPC work is that the CPC is chartered with approving the bylaws for projects, although the needs to be updated. The CPC is chartered. I'm getting some feedback. I don't know whose mic. Thank you. Essentially, only for substantive changes does an FYI need to be sent to the board, and kind of like we as a group have the ability to decide that. In this case, it was brought to the board first because the TSC was originally chartered by the board, so it was replacing references to the board with the CPC. The board didn't approve or deny it. They simply said they see no problems with it, and it was moved forward to finish the process here with the CPC.
Yeah, I think this was just a one-off because, we're in transition. Otherwise, it is the CPC.
Okay, so what are the next steps then here? Do we just need to have a couple members review it and approve it in the issue?
I guess that's a good question in terms of, how we probably need to write it down at some point, but like, how are we going to be reviewing and approving them? I assume it's just the regular. Do we maybe open another issue and then people plus one, and if there's no objections, it goes through?
Yeah, I think it's worth considering the way in which Node had chartered working groups in the past, which was kind of just like everyone reviewed. I guess, yeah, that does add a question if we want to have it be kind of a +1 system or a descent system, because this is, we want to make sure it actually has eyes on it. I think there's also a question about whether or not we want to request from the foundation legal review, especially for the initial charters. I think that's up to us if we want to have that level of, oversight.
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems to make sense to have an issue in the CPC and maybe raise that, and we can pass it along to legal if need be, if we determine it's needed, and then approve in the CPC issue.
I would prefer that we get legal review before when we approve new projects. Overall.
Yeah, new projects overall, I think makes sense.
Yeah, for new projects, but for changes that are more editorial or something that I would not.
I think that is a little bit like outside of the scope of the current discussion, though, right? I think that might be one. If we want to discuss that, we should probably have a different discussion focused on that. The current context is specifically Node and the TSC charter changes.
Still, we need to set up a process for doing these things going forward. So likely, like we will have to update 30-something charters.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I would likely prefer to have a discussion about the process we are going to update all of those. And,
right, and I think that's different than new projects coming in, though.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Okay.
I guess the question is, do we think we need a legal review of those 30?
I think that might, like, having worked with this stuff before to some extent, or having experienced it, that might be a massive time sink.
That's what I was thinking too. But
yeah. And so I'd be concerned about that and making sure that we're not forcing some time drain on people who don't necessarily want it, and two, making sure that we're able to continue doing the work of the foundation. That said, it could be opt-in if projects want to have it reviewed. I imagine most won't. The node TSC and ComCom and others may feel differently, though.
I suspect it could also be if on request of CPC members. So if the CPC members who are reviewing it look at it and say, oh, this is brand new or substantially different than it was before, let's ask for one, versus, oh, this is a tweak to the existing one that it's not really changing too much, right?
True.
I don't know if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Could we
I like the
ask-
idea.
Oh, please go for it, Trey.
I was just saying, I like the idea of it being an opt-in, process, and then also up to, we could establish like a charter review subcommittee for this group, and then leave it up to the discretion of that committee to say, this one probably ought to be run up the flagpole to Andy, or not. I think that's a path of least friction.
So one thing that we could also look into doing would be getting legal on the board to make us a starter charter, something that's just like, the baseline that's a starting place for all people. And if people don't stray too far off from that, like generally approved template, then it probably doesn't really even need the initial charter to go to the board.
I'm super happy with that idea, actually. Having a template for new projects.
Yeah.
That will solve a lot of questions.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense.
I'm wondering if we should capture that. I think that there's an issue for me to create like a template for onboarding new projects. Maybe it should be dropped in there.
We already have that proposal, Joe.
Okay.
Like what we would need to do is a request to the board to have legal draft up a template.
Okay.
And we could add that to the new project proposal that Jory and I have already drafted.
Great.
Okay, talking about the updating the charters for all the 31 projects, what do we want to do there?
I think it'd be great to just have a couple of people from our CPC group do a quick committee and try and run through these that way. But that's my suggestion, just to get the ball started, and to also not consume the entire committee's brain space with what will probably be more administrative than anything else.
My only concern there is that what is the preferred way to contact all of those projects? Like, I don't think we have captured that anywhere in the new OpenJS structure. So are we just chasing them to do this work? Are we doing the work for them? Or
I've been chasing them down.
okay, yeah. I imagine that, but I'm not surprised.
I have everybody, like the project lead emails, and beyond that, I'm not ashamed to poke them on Twitter and other places, and you know, most of the projects are really, really responsive. So
that is a good question on how, like, it should be documented somewhere, the contact list.
yeah.
Now I don't know if we want to put emails in public, although I know, yeah, that's the question.
Well, I think they should all be subscribing to the project's email list that we already have. So that's like one obvious thing.
Yep.
And, you know, we could have a secondary email list, but again, like I think most folks are, they're busy. They don't always have time to, you know, check these mass like newsletter style emails. So a lot of times what I just has found is more effective is writing a personal note. And that gets more traction. So we could keep a list of the project leads and their names on our somewhere in our GitHub org. That seems like it would make sense. Since we keep track of all of the projects, we should keep track of who's, you know, the lead maintainer of said projects.
Yeah,
so,
agreed. Or even, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to interject that we're near the bottom of the hour and we're still on our first issue here.
So I'll propose, I will open a issue that says approve charter changes for Node.js charter. And I'm going to paste the link into the issue and into the chat so people can go and review that. And then I can volunteer to open an issue that says we need to define the review process so that we don't forget that. And then we'll need somebody to volunteer to sort of push that forward. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, great. So moving on, the next issue on the agenda is creating a new standards working group repo, which is issue 190. I'll drop it in the chat here. This is discussed at the Collab Summit standard session. There are a few items listed here, and we've got a few +1s already. I'm a big +1. I'll add that there as a thumb at least. Any objections? Should we just move forward on this?
So this is I'm a little embarrassed because everybody was so +1. I was like, okay, great. I'm getting a lot of people interested in following up on it. So I went ahead and did it. But there is one open question, which is whether we should technically call it a working group, which I think is valid. So we could call it like an interest group for right now until the CPC actually charters a working group. Does not matter to me, but I think if we do want to be very, you know, precise with our organization, then probably I should have been more thoughtful on that.
Or maybe just a team. I think that's what we've used in the Node one. Like there's working groups which are chartered, and then otherwise it's just a team.
Yeah, teams and strategic initiatives have been what we've used.
Okay, well, I'll change that that repo name to team standards-team.
Or actually, I mean, does it need to be in the, like, I don't think we've ever put team in the repo name. It's just that it's a team that owns that repo.
I think that's fine if to have teams.
That way, the only thing is if it changes, then you got to rename the repo, right?
True.
I don't really have any strong, you know, I don't have a strong feeling one way. So if people think team is good, but I don't think it's mattered before in the Node one, and we just like the security. I guess now maybe security
WG
does have that. That's an exception though. Like if there's any API.
Yeah, release is its own thing. Build is just build.
Yeah.
Like, we don't state whether it's a team or a working group. That helps with canonical links later in case it ever changes. But it's kind of, you know, this is in the weeds of nittiness.
Yeah. All right, great. So I think we're good on moving on with this one. Excellent. Thank you, Jory. Added Collab Summit proposal. What's this one? This is a pull request 187. Matteo, you open this. You want to give us some context?
Yes, of course. This is the proposal for making sure that we have an OpenJS collaborator summit next time, and there was a lot of feedback already. So there are a couple of minutia, I think. But we hadn't had a meeting for a while, so I think we can just probably land it as soon as possible. It doesn't seem like this is stage one in the end, because Miles said we could be stage one, so likely we are going to be stage one.
Great.
And so it's a stage one proposal, which so I think do you think there is anything here that we need to be discussed before landing, or can this land? There's a bunch of LGTM, so is there anybody that is? I'm just checking with you folks. Can we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you think we can land?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm landing it.
No objections. All right, great. Excellent. Thank you.
I wonder a little bit, since we're asking, like, do we want to review everything that lands in the meeting, or is it like, should we just agree if there's more than X approvals and it's been, X, Y days, things can just land?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should have like just kind of updates on things that have landed, just to surface them to the group if they're unaware. I don't know. Or we could call out at the beginning or the end. Are there any things that people want to make sure the group knows about that landed or something? I mean, I know we should all be subscribed and be aware, but just in case.
I think we just need to like have in our governance for the team, like explicit about what the expectation is there, because if people are operating under the expectation that things are landing in the weekly meeting and not in between, then that will kind of mismatch the expectation if we're landing things without bringing it up during the meeting. If that's how people are planning to operate and planning to engage in consensus.
Right, and that's what I was just saying. We should define that, because it seems like sometimes we'll land some things, other times people wait, and it's like, do we need to wait for the meetings, or is it that, as long as there aren't objections, we can just move forward? Which would people prefer?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer on things moving, action happening and not waiting for weekly in-person meetings.
I would also agree with the previous. The meetings should really be a way of bringing things to bringing these issues that might be landing to the attention of all participants that should know about them. It should not be that we're expecting to do things in the meeting itself, but outside of it. So I would prefer us not to have any strict requirements of you have to have this many people agreeing before you can say that consensus has been achieved. But it would be nice, for example, for most things to at least go past one or maybe even two meetings, so that people have time to notice them, even if they're not tracking the repo daily.
Yeah. So I mean, usually, I mean, not usually, but one approach is to make the bar fairly low. Like, okay, you need at least say 2 approvers, and then you could pick the time. Like I think you're suggesting at least a week, right?
Something like that. Yeah, maybe.
That's the thing, though. If we're going to have a week, then we have a weekly meeting.
Right. But sometimes the meeting's canceled. You need to bring them up and spend time in the meeting.
Yeah.
If everybody's agreeing, I think you don't necessarily need to, right?
I think maybe, and I don't know if this needs to be spelled out, but maybe an expectation is before the meeting, go through recent pull requests and make sure you're up to speed.
I think one thing also worth considering is that like certain things probably can be changed and certain things can't. So like a really good example of this is the charter. The charter absolutely cannot be changed without board approval. So I think that making clear what things can be changed and what things can't, like something like the README is probably not a big deal. Something like a governance document or a proposal, like a change in the proposal's staging. Like we may want to just document that to be explicit about certain things that do require a meeting, and then anything else can be good.
And perhaps this is even something the chair would be monitoring and staying on top of. Does that seem accurate from people who have chaired committees, councils like this?
Certainly on top of the ones that are tagged for the agenda, to sort of see if there's something that can be helped along on those.
Yeah, my experience has been it's more about the agendas in the meeting and not about, like, the chair is not necessarily responsible for all the work that's going on at all time.
No.
But that may be different in other organizations.
Okay.
So what would this document be called in the cross project council? Like, is this go into a contributing .md?
Contributing or governance. Could even just be right in the README.
Yeah.
In the modules team, we have it in a governance document.
Yeah, there is a governance already. So it's got team membership, team meetings, consensus seeking process. It might actually fit into them.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, we have a section after consensus seeking process just called pull requests, which just outlines the process and specifically.
Well, actually, it's already there. It basically says pull requests must have no objections and have been open for at least 72 hours in order to be merged into this repository. Now it also says this applies only to that repository, so it's slightly out of date, but so do we want to, I think we can just update that section.
Yeah, we could update that section and just add a caveat for the files that require like more oversight. Specifically, I would imagine that's the charter.
Yep. So I'll volunteer to do that, appear for that update. Do we, in terms of time, it says 72 hours, though it sounded like maybe we want to make it longer. The question is sort of like, are there things
I think
that need
72 hours is fine for a minimum.
Okay. And any number of, like, this doesn't
just,
any number of reviewers. Is there any?
Your earlier suggestion of 2 reviewers did sound like it would be a sensible minimum.
Yeah, I agree.
That should not be difficult to achieve for anything that, you should go through.
Yeah, if you can't, yeah. Okay, so I'll do an update that basically says 72 hours, 2 reviewers, with a note that, of course, things like the charter that need to be approved by the board can't land until that's taken place.
And that's approved by 2 voting or regular members, correct?
I'd say regular members.
Voting or regular?
Yep.
Maybe, sure.
Like voting members, it's only in the case where there's an objection, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I appreciate regular by default.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's the way the charters and everything's written. So.
Yep. All right, great. So I think we're good on this one.
Yep.
The next issue on the agenda is issue 179. This is nominating chair and director for the cross-project council. I believe we're going to wait until the end of the recent events in Berlin, and then we would open up who the nominations were and begin voting. Is that accurate?
So I was under the impression that the nomination period was closed now, and that we were going to try and run we were going to announce who the candidates were and run that election for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I might have misstated that, but that's what I meant.
Okay.
Open it up as in who is nominated, but yes, it's closed, and go from there. And I think Brian is the keeper of the keys on these nominations. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yep, that's right.
Great. How do we want to proceed?
It would be nice to hear who the nominees are.
Yeah, so I think in the ComCom, the person who's the keeper usually opens up an issue for each person, and they have an opportunity to update like some sort of candidate statement, and then voting questions and such happen, and voting is opened up.
I can do that. So in addition to candidate statements, is there anything else I should put in? Like, would you like me to put in a template for each person to use so it's more or less normalized?
I would additionally just say, make sure that there is the availability for Q&A.
Yeah.
And also a time box, making sure that that's obvious.
Okay. What's a reasonable time box for something like this?
Typically in ComCom, we've done a week, but that might not apply here.
I guess a quick question, Brian, how many candidates had submitted for each of the positions?
Yeah.
Let's see. So I have I have 2 for the CPC chair and 1 for the director nomination.
So if there's only 1 for the director nomination, then we don't even need to do an election.
Yep.
Could we just do it in this meeting by acclamation?
The election, no. That I don't think that's a good way to do it. Just because you're limiting the scope to people who are able to be here. But the director, yes, that there's no competition, so it's a default to that person.
Yeah, agreed.
So I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse. Do we want to do that right now, or what do you prefer?
The director, yes. I as a regular member, not as a voting member. Yes, I think that's appropriate.
Agreed.
Same.
Drum roll.
So before we do that, weren't there multiple people in the GitHub issue that raised their hands to be the director?
Yeah.
I don't know if there were.
I'm going by emails that I received.
There were multiple on the node side, not on the CPC side.
So I see at least 1 in the issue, and so I would say, could we just confirm that the person who in the issue said they wanted to do it is the same person that submitted through email?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we move this to next week just to be totally sure that we're doing everything totally right?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, especially with the habit, some people don't check email very much or would not be, in the habit to do so versus in the GitHub.
Yeah. And candidates, this gives you a week to think about your candidate statement as well.
Mm-hmm.
So will we do everything next week, or will you put the chairs in? Or should we just kind of say we're putting this off a week and everybody has another week to self-nominate, nominate others, and for either role, and then we'll reconvene?
If I can make a suggestion, I mean, by the end of the day here, we should be able to make sure that there is, in fact, 1 person, or if there are multiple that came in through other sources and I'm not aware of those, then we'll get those figured out. I can get those issues opened up by the end of the day. If you want to give it a week, one thought would be we can have a week here for the candidates to put their candidate statements in, and then it can be a topic of discussion at the meeting. We can either hold an offline vote after that or do the vote in next week's meeting. Either way.
Well, we would vote offline, you know, asynchronously, not necessarily in the meeting.
Okay, so then the timing should still work out. So assuming that we have a single candidate for a position, then next week it's really just a matter of affirming, and there would be, you know, sufficient time to see what's what the person has submitted, and then the vote, if it's offline anyhow, then we're not necessarily bound by the time of next week's meeting. So we should be able to get this all put together by the end of today, though.
Sounds good. All right, great. Moving on then. So the next agenda item is issue number 178. Start accepting nominations for regular members. Let's see here. This has been around for a while. Does anybody have any context on what's holding us up here?
We're really just waiting for the README, updated README to land so that then people can start PRing themselves in. So it would be nice to get that PR landed. And
there is a PR open?
There's a PR to update for a number of different reasons. So where is it? README. I'm just finding where I'm in the wrong repo, sorry. It's number 182. Here, I'll paste it in the minutes.
Yeah, can we get it linked to this issue as well, and this one forward?
Yeah.
Great. So there's. Do we think that there's anything to discuss here, or do we need to just kind of?
No, I don't think so. Just
okay. Heads up, everybody. Check that out, and you know, we can merge that in. Is it a large? Do you think that there are other blocking issues on that pull request, or do you think we can?
Well, Rich has a bunch of comments.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's approved by 2 people. So, yeah, Rich is, I think, who opened it? Miles opened it. So Miles does have to take a look at Rich's most recent comments. And then hopefully it can land.
Okay, great. And maybe in the future we can keep things a little more isolated and merge them in quicker and get smaller issues moved forward. I mean, not that it's necessarily a small issue. Regular members. Great. Okay, so moving on, just a time check. We only have 10 minutes left here. New process for CPC reps to share responsibility for travel fund. Let's see, that's issue number 172. If I remember correctly, Matteo had something of a proposal, and that's the Collab Summit proposal that's merged. Does that cover this, Matteo, or do you want to kind of get us up to speed?
I'm lost on what you're talking about.
This issue is the new process for CPC reps to share responsibility for travel funds.
This is slightly, the issue is slightly different, so I wouldn't close this issue.
Okay.
So this is broader to some extent. So when we get the summit approved, then we might as well, like, this is part of solving that issue.
Okay. The question I have is, do we want to spend much time on this? Do we want to touch on any of the other, I mean, there are 2 other issues here. We have 10 minutes.
I don't need, this doesn't need to be in the agenda for the time.
A quick point of order that I just wanted to point out that is dawning on me is I don't think that we have quorum in this meeting. And I think that we need to figure out in general, or maybe we did before Chris left, but we no longer have quorum because we've got Nick, Evan, Emily, Brian, Joe, and Mateo, which is 6 of the 15. So even with Chris, we only had 7 of the 15 voting members.
But I don't actually, does that, I'm not sure that the governance is written so that you would need, unless you're taking a vote, like an actual vote, I don't think that actually that number is the number that matters.
Okay, I just think we should be explicit about that, since that's the governing body that oversees like these decisions. If we're making decisions in this meeting, whether or not we need quorum, I think is an important thing for us to figure out.
Yeah.
I think it's like anything. If there's a decision, it should be through GitHub where everybody can be involved. And it's kind of like, if there's an objection that needs to be overruled, then you could talk about quorum of the voting members, right? But if basically it's been in the issue tracker and it's met what we're putting into that governance doc in terms of landing, i.e. no objections, 2 reviews, 72 hours, like that's effectively how decisions are made, right?
Do we have any rules requiring quorum? Just a quick search for quorum only brings up the notes from a meeting from last October, which mentioned that we don't yet have quorum rules.
Yeah, I think that's what Miles is recommending, because even if you're like, part of the point is, yes, we're mostly working in GitHub and that's great. And we're following the 72-hour rules. But if we are, like, for instance, multiple issues today, talking through decisions that didn't need a vote necessarily because there's no objection, but we don't have quorum, then it's just whoever's showing up. That's, you know, from a CPC thing, I thought we were trying to avoid that sort of thing happening. You know, even if it's small things, those add up because you get a momentum going from the people who are not able to attend.
So I'm just trying to understand, like, is a suggestion then that if there's no quorum, we cancel the meeting, or?
No, it's that you just need to be careful about decisions that you're making while you're talking through things. Because I mean, you really should be voting on things in the as you said, in the GitHub issue, if this is the.
But we shouldn't be like making decisions about governance, for example, without quorum of the body. Or further, like, to me, if we are not consistently reaching quorum, we should be keeping track of that. And that should be something that we're bringing up with the voting CPC members, because we should have enough attendance from those members that we constantly have quorum. Otherwise, we have a bigger problem in engagement from the projects.
Mm-hmm.
But also, to be fair, like, we did push off, like, director, you know, we did push off the, like, announcing the nominations for the director or chair seats, right? Like, that was a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Will this change too once we get the process in for regular members, and that would kind of expand the group to some extent?
I don't believe that regular members should be counted towards quorum.
Well, that's not necessarily true, Miles.
That's why I said believe.
That there is only a certain class of things of decisions that needs to be taken by the voting members, and for the rest, usual consensus seeking applies. So
sure, but you're going to have to write out what those are. Then you have to draw the line.
yeah. That's the problem. That's the problem.
That is defined in the charter. Like, the charter is specific about the things that the voting members have to decide on, and basically then says other things. So basically, like project progression, it's clear about that being something the members need to be involved in and make the, you know, it's explicit about that. And then I have to go back and look at it, but it does have the list. And basically, for anything else where the group can't come to a consensus, then the voting members, you know, take a vote. Otherwise, it's the standard consensus seeking process.
So I'd like to just slightly interrupt. This seems like something that we're not going to be able to get consensus on, especially since there's not quorum here. You have other agenda items, and we have like 5 minutes or 4 minutes left. If we could try to knock some of those out, that would be awesome.
So I want to point out that one of the reasons why at least one project isn't able to attend is the meeting time. And that was a matter that we had hoped to have settled, some time ago. And so I would love for us to close out the issue of a new meeting date and time so that we can accommodate those other projects that aren't able to meet on Mondays.
Yep, let's move. That makes sense.
So how do we propose? So moving on to issue number 129, because that's what I was hoping to do as well before time ended. How do we propose we solve this meeting issue challenge that we've been unable to get past? I propose that we have a separate meeting to just kind of work through this. Somebody said that there's a tool that can evaluate a spreadsheet like this and find optimum times. We just need to figure it out.
I mean, isn't that what the numbers at the bottom do?
Not exactly, because the highest number isn't necessarily the best time per se, like a spread across the group.
Gotcha.
I think, right?
Yeah, no, it's that you could pick that time, but that could still exclude somebody completely, whereas a lower number could allow everybody to show up with slightly less optimum,
Gotcha. So what it sounds like is it's like a binary thing of can someone make it or not.
It's like avoiding those cases where, if we've got 2 times, if there's people who cannot make either of those 2 times, then they're not as good as maybe 2 times where everybody can make one of the 2, right?
Yep.
Does anyone remember this? Someone mentioning a tool that helps?
Just linked you on.
What's that?
I linked one in the chat. It's called Doodle.
No, this is what's just a sec.
Is that what you're talking about?
Is that the spreadsheet of the times, Emily? Yeah, that's the spreadsheet that we're working off of. But someone had mentioned that there's a tool that can evaluate the times that work best for most people rather than just the highest scores.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Nikita has something that does a little bit more analysis on a spreadsheet like that he's used for the TSC.
That's it.
So it's 3:50. It's just end of time here. How do we want to move forward on this? Do we want to spin off a particular meeting for this to work through it and maybe get that tool to run on this?
This doesn't seem like an issue that is getting solved through meetings. We have the GitHub. This sounds like a GitHub issue that gets people to basically deal with the issue when they're not explicitly time limited as we explicitly now currently are. So if you, Joe, write an issue and then we take it there and then try and come up with some solution like 3 sets of 2 times between which we alternate and then end up picking one of those. Something like that.
I'm afraid we'll get into the weeds in an issue and not get any further either. I think that we haven't really dedicated the appropriate amount of time to this in a meeting, where if we spun out one meeting particular to this, that we could really dig into it.
I think, and that puts a stake in the ground, right? Like we don't want this to drag out for many more weeks at the expense of the people who can't make it.
I would very much like to recommend that we have this resolved by the next meeting. This has been going on for a very long time. And I believe the deadline was May 1st and it's now June 10th. So it'd be awesome if we could just finalize this. And Jory, specifically, do you know the individuals who are not necessarily the ones that are able to not make this meeting, but also just the ones that this meeting time is specifically inconvenient for, whether or not they're here today?
They're not here today.
Okay.
So yeah, that I'm thinking specifically the representatives from the Dojo project are not here, and they have said quite specifically it's because Mondays are not workable. Okay,
well that definitely seems like a very different problem than like what time of the day, and I think that's much easier to get resolution on than what time of the day. Like the two options that we have are not Monday. So
Yeah.
it looks like either of those will just work in that case. So
we just pick times and then iterate again if those times don't work.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like maybe making a decision and running with it is better than holding another meeting to fight it
Yep.
out.
Okay.
Given that Tuesday at 1600 UTC has the largest number, and it looks like there's actually only, sorry, Michael, there's only 10 on there. That is the only column I see with 10. That might be the best possible time. Additionally, for Tuesday, and then the same time on Wednesday also actually has 0, 0, 0.
I have to leave, folks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matteo.
Thank you, Matteo.
I'd like to suggest that we move forward with that time on Wednesday, considering that it overall seems to be a better time for most people. Yep. It has a slightly lower score, but it doesn't have a 0 for anyone.
Agreed.
Let's go with that.
All right. So Wednesday at 1600 UTC.
Yep.
That's 11 a.m. Eastern time.
So, and just to, because I know that we're out of time, but I had asked this in the chat, and I know Miles, you had responded, but I just wanted to make sure. So when we talked about the nominations being with Brian Warner, are we clear then that the nominations are closed now? Someone was asking in the OpenJS Slack.
They are closed as far as I'm concerned. Please feel free to say that I'm wrong.
That's my understanding as well.
Yep, mine too.
Cool. All right.
As a final note, I know we're over time, probably technically over. The quorum question. While we've been talking, I've gone over the charter and whatever I could find. I cannot find any documentation that would say that we do have a minimum quorum. So the assumption that we need half of the participants is, I think, an assumption that we're making. I don't think we can be under quorum at the moment.
So what we're saying is we're recommending that that rule be made for making sure that we're inclusive on decision making. It's that governance is missing.
So we open an issue to define that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have to clarify as well when or what that applies to, because that's where that is.
Right.
Yeah. My preference would be for us not to implement this rule, but I'm happy to take that discussion offline once the issue exists.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. And with that, I guess we're done, people.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Should end the stream, Michael.
That might be Matteo, although I'm surprised it hasn't. Anyway, I'll just end the